This ship shouldn't have worked. It was light. It was thin. It had no deep keel, and yet it conquered oceans, rivers, and empires. They didn't knock. They didn't warn. They didn't siege cities. They arrived from nowhere. One moment, silence. The next, ships on the shore. Not massive, not armored, not intimidating at first glance. And yet, these ships changed history. They crossed open oceans without maps, sailed rivers too shallow for enemy ships, landed armies directly on beaches, and vanished. No ports, no roads, no escape. This wasn't luck. This wasn't bravery alone. This was engineering. A ship so advanced that Europe had no answer to it for centuries. So how did the Vikings build a vessel that made kingdoms powerless? Why was it faster than anything else on the sea? And how could one simple design turn farmers into the most feared raiders of their age? This is the true story of the Viking longship, the weapon that made the Viking Age possible. Without these ships, there would have been no Viking Age at all. The Viking longship was the backbone of Norse society. It was not just a vessel for war. It was transportation, trade, exploration, and survival. What made it unique was its long, narrow, and symmetrical design. The bow and stern were nearly identical, allowing the ship to reverse direction instantly, no turning required. This feature alone gave Vikings a massive tactical advantage. Longships were lightweight, yet strong. They could sail across open seas, but also navigate rivers so shallow that enemies believed they were safe inland. Unlike later medieval ships, longships had no deep keel. This meant they could land directly on beaches, allowing warriors to disembark anywhere, no harbors needed. Speed, surprise, mobility. This was naval warfare reinvented. Every Viking ship began in the forest. Shipbuilders carefully selected oak, pine, and ash, each chosen for specific parts of the vessel. Oak was preferred for the hull, dense, durable, and resistant to damage. Pine was lighter and often used for planking. Ash was flexible, perfect for oars and supports. Trees were not cut randomly. Builders followed the natural curves of the wood, using branches and bends to match the ship's shape. This reduced the need for forcing timber into position and made the ship both stronger and more flexible. The forest itself shaped the ship. One of the most important Viking innovations was clinker construction. Instead of laying planks edge to edge, Vikings overlapped them like roof shingles. Each plank was fastened with iron rivets and sealed with tarred wool or animal hair. This design allowed the hull to flex with waves rather than fighting against them. In rough seas, a longship did not resist the ocean. It moved with it. This flexibility prevented cracking and allowed Viking ships to survive storms that would destroy heavier vessels. The result was a ship that was light, strong, and remarkably resilient. At the center of the ship stood a single mast supporting a large square sail made of wool. These sails were expensive and labor-intensive, often dyed with patterns or symbols. When the wind was favorable, the sail could push the ship at impressive speeds, sometimes over 15 knots. But wind was not always reliable. That's why every longship also carried rows of oars, one for each warrior. In battle or narrow rivers, oars provided silence, precision, and control. The combination of sail and oars made the longship one of the most versatile vessels of the ancient world. Vikings sailed without compasses, charts, or modern instruments. Instead, they relied on experience, memory, and nature. They studied the sun, stars, waves, birds, and clouds. Some evidence suggests they may have used sunstones, crystals that help locate sunlight through clouds. They memorized coastlines and passed navigational knowledge orally from one generation to the next. Navigation was not written, it was lived. In warfare, longships were terrifying. They could appear suddenly, strike quickly, and disappear before an organized defense formed. Raids often targeted monasteries and coastal towns, places rich in goods but poorly defended. The shallow draft allowed ships to retreat up rivers, far beyond enemy reach. Speed was everything. The ship was not just transport, it was the strategy itself. Longships were not only tools of war. They carried traders across the Baltic, the North Sea, and deep into the rivers of Eastern Europe. They reached Iceland, Greenland, and even North America. Without longships, Viking exploration would have been impossible. These vessels connected worlds. For Vikings, ships held deep symbolic meaning. Important individuals were sometimes buried in ships, along with weapons, animals, and treasures. The ship was believed to carry the soul into the afterlife. Even in death, the longship sailed on. The Viking longship was more than wood and iron. It was innovation. It was freedom. It was power. Built by hand, guided by instinct, and perfected by generations. Without it, the Viking Age would never have existed. And even today, its legacy still rides the waves. Life aboard a Viking longship was harsh. There were no cabins, no beds, no protection from wind or rain. Warriors sat on wooden chests that held their weapons, food, and belongings. These chests served as seats by day and storage throughout the journey. When storms came, there was nowhere to hide. Cold wind, salt water, exhaustion. But this hardship created discipline. Every man had a role. Every movement mattered. A longship only worked when everyone moved as one. Speed was not just an advantage. It was the longship's greatest weapon. Under good conditions, Viking ships could travel over 200 kilometers in a single day. That meant towns were attacked before warnings could spread. By the time defenses formed, the ships were already gone. The longship did not break cities. It simply outran them. Viking longships were built to survive. Damaged planks could be replaced individually. Crews carried tools, wood, and tar. Minor repairs were done on shore or during long journeys. This allowed fleets to operate far from home for months at a time. If a ship survived the storm, it could usually be repaired. Not all longships were built for war. Some were narrow and fast, others were wider and deeper. Trade ships carried iron, furs, silver, and goods across vast networks. The same core design adapted to many roles. One technology, many uses. Other cultures saw Viking ships, but copying them was not easy. The knowledge was not written. It was passed orally. Shipbuilding was a craft, not a recipe. Without the materials, skills, and mindset, the longship could not simply be recreated. The Viking longship was not invincible, but in its time it was unmatched. It turned water into pathways and distance into power. For centuries it carried the Vikings into history, not through numbers, but through design.